Welcome to 1855 Masterclass, presented by Durham Region Economic Development. We are very glad that you're here tonight. An event like this is not possible without the partners that we have in place, and you guys are in for a treat because of those who have contributed to this event. So before we get going and I hand things over to Regional Chair John Henry, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge those who were integral in allowing us to put up the speaker series on so we can have the caliber of content to share with the region and the business community. So first and foremost, the Durham Region Economic Development. They have been an incredible lead partner for us in getting this off the ground. They bought the vision of us wanting to expand the innovation landscape where we live, and also, too, to shine a light on what we're doing and as a whole as we expand the growth sector. So that's a really wonderful partner for ours, and that's why we're presented by that organization, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that shortly. Secondly, the town of Whitby. So 1855 Whitby, which is just next door, is the first tech and innovation accelerator in the region, strategically funded by the town of Whitby and the CEO of 360 Insights, who's here tonight. Without the town and their vision of us having to do this to fill the defined gap in the innovation ecosystem, we wouldn't be here. So we're very, very grateful for the town, and they provide us with this home for the Masterclass series in the Innovation District, downtown Whitby. So thank you, Town of Whitby. Next, we have the academic partners, which we have a fantastic, robust partnership with, which is Ontario Tech University and Durham College. So this Masterclass series features thought leadership that will also benefit the students who are coming up in those programs. You'll see volunteers from outside from Durham College, and we want them to be able to be inspired and empowered as they go forth on their professional paths. And so in having those academic partners on board as an investing partner and also an engagement partner with this event is really, really special for us. And we're doing all kinds of wonderful things. If you haven't been out to either of those institutions, you really need to take a look because they're trailblazing their own paths in the innovation landscape. And last but not least, Brookfield Residential. So Brookfield has come on board to help us with the cultural experience. After we're done every series, we're going to go out and have food and drink, experience local, farm to table, the great breweries and food purveyors that we have in the region. And they have made that experience possible because it's not all work. Sometimes we like to have the after-hours relationship connection time as well. So thank you so much to those partners. We've got a great night, and I'm so glad that you came to join us. At this time, I'd like to invite Regional Chair John Henry to come up. Thank you.
So good evening. Are you excited? Yeah. Oh, come on. Are you excited? Yeah. Oh, what a great way to start the evening. And in the room, and it's hard to see, but I want to recognize Mayor Mitchell is here tonight and local councillor Deidre Newman. Thank you for being here tonight. Brian Bridgman, our Commissioner of Economic Development and Planning, Matt Gaskell from the town of Whitby, and of course to the region of Durham, Simon, to our Economic Development team. Thank you so much for being here. And as you know, I'm John Henry, and I am the chair of the greatest region in all of Canada, Durham Region. And we're here tonight at 1855 Whitby, just across the street from where we are right now. The gem is in Durham Region. 1855's Whitby. The motto is growth lives here. And I'd like to talk about growth tonight. You know that you live in the fastest growing region in all of Canada. It is an amazing story. The other regions through the GTHA are having a hard time keeping up to us. Our population is growing, our talent is growing, and our companies are growing. With so many innovative companies accelerating their growth at 1855 right here in Whitby, the future of Durham Region is right now. This Masterclass series is just one part of it. Everything 1855 Whitby is doing to provide support for the tech community and the innovation business community. The Economic Development and Tourism team at the region of Durham is focused on helping this sector grow and thrive in Durham Region. And that's why we've partnered with 1855 Whitby on this series. Masterclass 1855 is designed to help the talent in Durham Region grow, to play bigger, to be better, and to dominate. Growth does live at 1855 Whitby. Growth lives in Durham region. And tonight's masterclass is presented by Peter Goldie. And let me tell you a little bit about Peter. Peter is the principal partner at Category Designs Advisors. Peter began his career in brand management at Procter & Gamble, building revenue for world-class brands like Ivory, Crisco, and Pringles. Peter co-founded multiple startups and held several operational roles, including CMO at LeanPlum, the leading mobile marketing platform at GM at Fluid, a top e-commerce agency. Peter has a track record of creating and launching and marketing dominating products. And now Peter is a coach, helping companies design their own categories. The concept of category design came from Silicon Valley, but Peter is passionate about sharing this groundbreaking concept in Canada. And that's because while Peter lives in the Silicon Valley with his wife Susan and their boys, he hails from Toronto. He's educated at Queen's University in Kingston. And tonight's 1855 masterclass will shift the way business owners at any age view this category they are in. And it will encourage business owners to redefine themselves, translate their category into increased revenues, and dominate their market. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big Durham region welcome to Peter Goldie.
Thank you, John. Wow, what an introduction. Hard to move on the heels of that. So we're here to talk about category design, and the invitation said, play bigger, be better, and dominate. And what we're going to talk about is why that's wrong. You don't want to be better. It sounds good when you read it, and it attracted everyone to come out here, but you don't want to be better, you want to be different. So, John Henry, I really appreciate that introduction, and we had not met till today. And I have to tell you this kind of odd story, which is I have an affinity for John because that's my middle name. My birth certificate reads Peter John Henry Goldie, truly. It is just like, talk about a coincidence. Isn't that crazy? So a little bit about me and category design and why I'm interested in category design. One of the first roles I had when I moved out of consumer packaged goods and into technology was with a company called Alias Research, founded in Toronto. It's a bit of a success story in the tech area. And we created a completely new category. So at the time, this is 20 plus years ago, there was a technology called CAD for engineering, computer-aided design, and engineers used that to build things in 3D with 3D graphics. But the industrial designers who did the original design of products and the sculpting up front, they didn't have digital tools. So we invented these digital tools, and we created this whole new category called CADE, Computer-Aided Industrial Design. And this company went on, Alias Research, to ultimately today, it's part of Autodesk, and still completely dominates the category. Even at the time, 10, 15 years ago, virtually every car company in the world was using it to design their cars, consumer electronics, all over the place. So it's a complete category king. And I'm totally excited to have had the opportunity to work on that. At the same time, we were using the same technology to do 3D computer graphics for entertainment, animation, special effects for films. Early customers were Industrial Light and Magic and Disney's Pixar. And that product, Maya, went on to win an Oscar for scientific and technical achievement and is, again, a dominating category king in the world of 3D animation. I then went to work on a business called Flash, which today is not an exciting business, but at the time, we grew that to be the #1 software on the planet. More people had Flash installed on their computers than anything else, and we took that power and that installed base, and we looked for a new opportunity to build a new category that was beyond what Flash did, which was in the days of early HTML, move things around on a page so you could do cartoons and animation. What we did is we looked at the business opportunity to have a better user interface and a better user experience on the web for business applications. And ultimately, we really created this new category called experience design. Now, everyone knows about experience design today and UI design and UX design, but those didn't exist back in the year 2000, where we focused on this idea of how you can deliver a better experience to customers on the web and generate more revenue, creating this whole field of experienced designers. So I am Canadian, and I grew up here. As John mentioned, I went to Queens. And I did move to the United States, and that was a really exciting opportunity. I moved down in 2000 in the midst of the internet boom to go work for an internet company. And it was a great place to be. Back then, the technology scene was not as exciting in Canada, and you were really at the epicenter. And me being a geek and working in the technology field, it was just an amazing place to be, so much activity going on. And really, what I want to do is encourage us as Canadians to build upon the energy that Silicon Valley had and extend that. One way is to play bigger. And I know people talk a lot about, and I do as well, the fact that the Canadian environment is different than the US environment. The US environment is known for being more risk-taking and more aggressive, and I know that's changing here too, which is great. Things like just the 1855 and doing a program like this, it's fantastic. There's so much going on in Canada now, but there is still, I think, the opportunity to be bolder, to be more aggressive, and really see what we can do to be more successful on the world stage. And playing bigger just happens to be a great way to say that. The book, Play Bigger, was an interesting evolution. The folks, you probably can't read their names down there, Al, Dave, and Chris, we all worked together at Macromedia when we were doing this experience design thing with Flash. And they went off and formed a consulting group and had a huge amount of success helping companies be more successful and build categories. And they decided that they were going to kind of open source that. We're going to publish our methodology and get it out there so more people can do it. And they brought in Kevin Maney, who's my business partner now. He was a very respected business tech author. And he corralled them together, and they created this book, fleshed out the methodology so that everyone could do it. And it really is now the Bible or the how-to guide for how do you create a new category. When they published the book, there was demand for people who knew how to create categories to help do that. So we formed a company, this gang here, Kevin, myself, and actually 3 of us are Canadians. We're going to have a little Canadian theme running through this. And we're sprinkled around the world in London and Singapore, Boston, and New York. And we basically help companies do this process of category design, although it's a DIY process. You just read the book and you kind of know what to do. And I'm here, as I said, because I'm passionate about Canada, my homeland, and I want to see Canada be more successful on the global stage, and doing everything I can to do that. So here I am, go Canada, let's play bigger. This is one of actually 3 days I'm doing between Toronto and Kingston with a similar presentation talking about the opportunity for category design to impact your startups. So who's into this thing called category design? Well, Mark Benioff, who founded Salesforce, is definitely a believer. I'll let you read that instead of reading it out loud. So is Jim Getz, the partner at one of the most respected VC firms in the Valley. And Anne Nuriko, the co-founder of Floodgate. And I really like what she says, secret sauce. So hopefully we're going to get to a little bit of the secret sauce of what's helping Silicon Valley companies take over the world. But this is the quote I'm most excited about, and the real reason why I'm here is Dan. So Dan's at 1855 Whitby, and he saw us present a year or so ago at the Ryerson DMZ, and it totally impacted his thinking on that day. This was not a slow thing. It was, boom, we have to go in a different direction. And he's the one who said, hey, 1855 Whitby, you should bring in CDA to talk to some more folks. So thank you, Dan. And this is the whole point of everything, having impact on people's strategy and the ability to make sure they're going in the right direction. So what is category design? Well, it's been around for a long time. It's not new. The book Play Bigger is the guide to how to do it in modern times. But one of the earliest category designers was this fellow, Clarence Birdseye. He's legendary for doing this. He invented frozen food. And what happened was he was a taxidermist and a scientist, and he was working with the USDA, and he was sent off on missions to go do research, and he was up in Newfoundland working with the Inuit, and he noticed that when they caught their fish, they'd toss it out onto a block of ice, and it would instantly freeze, and the fish would still taste great a couple weeks later. Good texture, good flavor, all of those things. And he thought, well, this has got to apply to other foods, and there's an opportunity here to fast freeze food. And he went back to where he lived in Brooklyn, worked on experiments, figured out fast freezing, and after a whole series of experiments, bankruptcies, business issues, injections of money from Goldman Sachs, and all these things, he finally built the frozen food business. Now, what's interesting about that is he did things that you really have to do to build a category as opposed to launch a brand. Imagine what it was like for him to create this category. He had to rally so many people around him. There were no freezers in the grocery store. There were no freezer rail cars to deliver the food. So in addition to inventing the way to fast freeze food and package it, he had to rally people around and create this whole ecosystem to create the category. And that's what they did. They rallied people around it. They built a category. He was not the only player there, but Birdseye, having invented and led this category, is still a category king in frozen food. They're still there today, one of the biggest players. So it really gives you a sense of the difference between building a category and just launching a product. So how do categories work? Paul Gorosky was an American economist working in the UK and did a lot of research on markets and how they evolve and what they are. And his research led to this, which is the category life cycle or the market life cycle. And the axis here is the number of vendors over time. And what happens is when a new idea occurs and someone starts to create a new market, one or two people go out there and you can see, and people see, oh, this might be interesting. And then as interest gains, more and more vendors step in. They see the opportunity. Oh, there's something going on here. There's something interesting. Or I have a different idea of how to do that. And the number of vendors grows over time. It then gets to a certain point where what Gorosky would call the dominant design is chosen. And what that is these vendors have been doing things in different ways, coming to market with different ideas, and at a certain point, consumers or customers start to gravitate to one of those solutions because there's a whole breadth. And then the vendors start to drop off. It's either they didn't choose the right way of approaching the problem and went out of business, or they've consolidated with other companies. So over the time, number of vendors goes down, and really there's 1, 2, or 3 leaders at the end of that. And of course, our goal is to become the category king and to be number 1. So that happens, and at the same time, as you can imagine, the economics of this new market increase. In the beginning, people don't know what it is. It's just some idea. They're not sure of it. They start buying it, and it grows over time and ultimately peaks. And usually the market starts to fall off the end for one reason or another. It's either evolved into a new market or something has happened and the single last vendor is soaking it for all it's worth and the market drops off a bit. So when you put these together, you can kind of see a dynamic where the market starts to really take off when these lines cross. And that is this magical moment that happens where people decide on the direction and believe in some folks who are going to dominate this market. That's when the category king is born, and that's what you're looking to do. So in research, the folks from Play Bigger Advisors did a huge amount of research going into the book. And one of it was to look at all of the venture-backed companies in the US started in technology, started since 2000. So between 2000 and 2016, there were around 66,000 companies. And they took all of that data and crunched it and looked at a lot of different things and then did a specific analysis on who were the most successful. So they narrowed it down to the 69 or so companies that IPO'd during that phase. So an IPO is generally a pretty good form of success. And then they went deeper and said, well, of these companies that IPO'd, who was really successful? And determined success as being how much value did you deliver to shareholders post the IPO? Did you really have a sustainable business that was meaningful and still growing and powerful after that IPO? And this is a plot of what those companies looked like against time. And why is it against time? Well, they looked for the correlation of these extra successful companies, and they looked at everything. And you'd think it might be how much money they raised, or what sector they were in, or what their revenue growth curve looked like at certain times. But the real correlation that the most successful companies had was time since founding. And it sounds kind of crazy. It's a bit of a head scratcher. It's just how old the company is determines their success. And they took this data to Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, and they said, well, we've seen this. This data looks right, but we don't know why. And they dig deeper and started to think about what that could be. The companies that go out in the right time frame, we call it the 610 law, it was on the previous slide, have been all of these giant unicorns that you know, including Google and Cisco and others. And for instance, Uber, just having gone out now, they're at the end of that window. Most of the companies that go out after 10 years kind of flatline in terms of the value they return to shareholders. And I think there's a big question in people's minds right now whether Uber is going to return a lot to shareholders or whether all that value is already in their stock price. So that's an example. Companies also on the earlier side run into some challenges. And you can see why. If you overlay those two graphs, you see that the sweet spot for companies to IPO is when they're in that super growth phase of taking over a new category that's emerging, and emerging is the king. So that middle piece is kind of easy to see. That's where you want to be. That's the right time to IPO. You've been in business long enough, and the category has been proven out. Some companies that really tanked on the early side, it's basically that the category hasn't been proven yet. They may have an exciting looking business, but we don't know where that's going to go. And I think a perfect example is Groupon. Groupon had this very exciting looking business. Everyone was jumping in, all kinds of companies doing daily deal as a concept. And it turned out that there just wasn't that big a business there in the end. Now, there were some economic things going on at the time as well, but ultimately it was still not this huge opportunity that people perceived and value from being a category king. So what could be driving this life cycle around this 6 and 10-year thing, and how are these markets evolving? A lot of it has to do with brain science. So our brains love categories. People immediately and automatically categorize everything they see. It's the way your brain deals with all this incoming information. You put things into categories. And it's interesting, researchers talked about this in the 40s and 50s and talked about information overload at that time. And if you can imagine, with no internet, no phone, no television, not all the same billions of messages we get on a weekly basis, that they talked about information overload. But when a lot of this research was done, that was when they learned really about how the brain categorizes things. And of course, as consumers, we know about categories. We go into a grocery store. It's not organized alphabetically. It's organized by categories. It makes life easy to deal with things in categories. And it's the same in the business world. If you're a CMO looking at a budget, you've got your categories that you slot things into, and you don't often open up new ones. But it can happen. So pay-per-click advertising was not a budget line item 20 years ago, and of course Google created that, and it is a budget line item if you're a marketer today. And in fact, that's your mission, if you're in a B2B kind of business, is to create a new budget line item, ultimately. But that takes some work. Another interesting thing about our brain is that we have biases, a lot of biases, and they affect how you think. So while we think we make decisions in a very pure, logical way, it's not true. We make decisions based on emotion and these biases that alter your thinking. So what that leads to is a whole series of, there are 50 cognitive biases, or more depending on how you slice them up. One classic one that anyone who negotiates knows is called the anchoring effect. And that's that the first time you see or hear something, it's anchored in your brain as being where it is. So in the case of the negotiation, someone says, oh, I'm going to sell this to you for $100. That $100 is fixed as the first thing you heard, and it's there, and it's in your mind. Or when Steve Jobs launches the iPhone, that's the definition of a smartphone. That is the smartphone. That's the first time you heard of it, and that's anchored in your brain. Another cognitive bias that impacts us is groupthink. And that's very straightforward. That's the fact that the people around you, your friends, your family, your colleagues, influence what you think based on what they think. And especially so if you respect them and like them. So if everyone around you has an iPhone, you're likely to want or have an iPhone because that's the way your group thinks. My favorite cognitive bias by far is choice supportive, because it's just so funny to me that it's real and it affects everyone. And that is when you make a choice, you're right by definition, because it's what you chose. So it's the circular set of thinking where if I chose to buy an iPhone and you asked me a year later, was that the right choice? I'm going to say yes, because I'm not dumb. I don't make dumb choices. I'm smart. So it's this self-reinforcing belief that you make the right choices. So these cognitive biases are important for category design, and I'll tell you why. So categories are the way people relate to products and companies. As we said, you see something new, you're slotting it into a category, and the emergence of a category is governed by how fast our brains can change. And there's a lot of things going on now. So how fast can the brain change? And how fast can we change people's behavior and their way of thinking and their way of making decisions? And at the end of the day, that might be 6 to 10 years. Now, this is accelerating when we look at companies in the past versus today, and you can open up markets and get traction faster. But in general, that's a lot of the dynamic that's behind this idea of, can I build a whole new category and market in the world in 2 years? Well, not likely. It's really going to take a little bit longer than that. One of the interesting things, a story about the number of vendors in a business and how long it can take is to go through this cycle is it has gotten shorter and shorter over time. So if you looked back at the automotive industry around 1900, there were literally hundreds of automobile manufacturers in the US. And they were making all kinds of different designs. And that curve took over, and over about a 30-year period, weeded out the hundreds down to the big three we know now and a few more. So today, it's probably more typically on this kind of time scale, and that's probably also getting shorter as we go, but it can take time. So if we're going to design a category, our opportunity is to utilize this understanding of cognitive biases and leverage it so that we can change people's thinking. If the new category is to emerge, people have to believe in it and understand it. So if you're a leader, that means your duty is kind of mind control. You need to condition people's minds and start working on that. And what that involves is your overall business strategy. So category design, we like to think of, we call this the magic triangle, is the third leg of the stool of building a category king. Most entrepreneurs, they start with product, and that's natural. I have a product idea. I'm going to search for product market fit, lean startup. What does it take to understand if a customer is going to buy my product? And that's natural. And then once they have that going, their next stage is to think about their company. What kind of company do I want to build? What's the culture going to be like? Where am I going to be located? How am I going to finance it? And then usually people stop there, and then they just go on their way to build the company. But what we recommend is people think about the category they're going to build. What is this billion-dollar category? What are the characteristics of it? And start thinking about that right away. What happens when you do that is you have this definition of this category that you're going to build, and almost invariably, it will actually affect your product design and your company design because you'll have a more clear picture of where you're going. And I'll mention a number of examples where product design has been altered after companies have done the category design process. So, how do you do category design? Well, first, it's think like a category designer. And category designers have a few different techniques that they use to think about a category. The first is look for what's missing. What's missing out there that I can fulfill? So Manoj is legendary as a category designer. He was working in the food industry, walking around a trade show for food, all the different things they had. At the time, one of the hottest things going was energy drinks. So Monster and Red Bull, all these energy drinks were coming out. And he was walking around looking at these and thinking, wow, I could really use a pick-me-up. I would like some energy, but I'm not thirsty. I don't want to drink a 16-ounce can of sweet liquid. That's not what I want. I just want an energy boost. So he went away and he created the idea of the energy shot. So the energy shot is a $5 billion market that came out of his head from something that's missing in the marketplace. Now, he happened to be a very smart entrepreneur and did a lot of smart things in addition to creating the idea, like having it be shelf stable so it didn't have to be in the refrigerator section and it could be at the checkout for impulse purchase, and just a great businessman. But that's one way to create a multi-billion-dollar market, is to fulfill a need that you see that's missing, something that's not there. The other, and I would say this is the number one theme of category design, is to think about being different instead of better. If you're better than someone else, it means you're competing with them and you're slogging it out for market share. If you're different, you have the whole category to yourself and an open field to play in until people come in and compete with you, which they should, and hopefully they will. So Lee Iacocca, Chrysler, they were in a terrible situation, facing bankruptcy, and he decided to do something different that no other car company was doing. There were trends going on at the time. The suburbs were really becoming popular. People were having large families, moving to the suburbs. And if you wanted a large family, you either had a station wagon, a long car, or you could buy a traditional van. Not so comfortable, not perfect, but higher and work better. But vans wouldn't even fit in a garage of a typical suburban home. So they created a completely new product that was a hybrid of the two, the minivan. And it created a whole new category. They marketed it like a category too. This is a brand new thing. And they became the category king. And what's amazing is 40 years later, they're still the category king. You may not think every day of buying a Chrysler, but they have a 50% market share of the minivan market worldwide. It's an amazing success story of creating something new and different than what other people were doing. Another great way to create a category is to show people a problem that they have they didn't even know they had. So the master of this is Steve Jobs. When he went to launch the iPad, he actually got up on stage and said, we're introducing a new category of product. And everyone has a smartphone, and they have a laptop, and this fits in between, and you need it for a reason. You need it because you want to consume media. And you want to consume Netflix and all these other things that you want to watch on your sofa, and the laptop's too clunky and the phone screen is too small. And you need this new thing. And people bought into it. It created this instant category overnight where tablet PCs had actually been around for a while. When Bill Gates launched the tablet PC a few years earlier, he kind of said, "Isn't this cool?" and talked about a bunch of technical features, but did not create in people's minds that they had a problem that he was solving for them that was completely new that they didn't know about. And that's the way you build a category. Here's an example that our firm worked on of a category that I'm sure cafe owners and bar owners didn't know they had, which was that they were missing media on the top of their drinks. But they did not know they had the naked drink gap, this gap of opportunity on the surface of their drinks. But in fact, it's an amazing thing. This company Ripples that will put a photograph or text on top of your Guinness beer or your cappuccino, they're going gangbusters because it's a really exciting, fun thing for people. No one knew that it was a media opportunity or that it would get people energized, but when people pick up that cup of coffee and it has their photo on it or a piece of text, they get really excited and energized, and it's just a fun thing. But no one knew they had that problem. No one came and asked them to invent that idea. Cafe owners weren't knocking at the door saying, "We need this," right? But they're going to build a fantastic opportunity, I think, with BevTop Media as this new space. Another interesting kind of market is what a VC we know originally called the $0 billion market. And that's something that you can get really excited about if you understand what it is and think about it in the right way. So the $0 billion market is the idea and the opportunity that you see right now for something that no one else sees. So right now, there aren't people out there doing it the way you're doing it. You have no competitors, but you see the opportunity for it to be a $1 billion market. And there are many examples of that where people went against the grain. AWS is a fantastic example. Amazon Web Services, multi-billion-dollar business, huge thing, fuels apps on the internet. There's my partner Kevin interviewing Jeff Bezos about it. And at the time, when they had that idea, it was not something that people were clamoring for, not a space that was very competitive. But Amazon said, well, we have excess compute capacity because we've got to gear up for Black Friday and another few key days of the year, so we have to be ready to handle that. But on the quieter days, we have free capacity. What do we do with it? And they had the idea of renting out their capacity, and the term that Jeff Bezos used at the time was computing by the sip, like you'd have a sip of a soft drink. And they went to market with this ability to rent computing, and not a lot of people necessarily believed in them, but it turned into this amazing multi-billion-dollar opportunity that at that point was literally a $0 billion opportunity. One of the ideas we like people to think about when they're trying to define a category is an idea that was from Stephen Johnson's book, and he calls it the adjacent possible. And it helps you think about the fit of competing with other people versus innovation and being too far out there. So the left axis is technology. So technology evolves, and you have certain levels of technology. And then society evolves and is willing to accept certain technology. So for example, in the lower left-hand corner, we could put television. It's now a very simple technology. It's moved from complex to simple, and society has completely adopted it. So it's very straightforward. In the upper right-hand corner would be some crazy technology that is unacceptable to people and doesn't exist yet, like a teleporter that would transmit you from one place to another. No one knows how to do that technology yet, and no one would be ready for it. Everyone would be afraid of it if it existed. So what you're looking for to build a compelling new category is being on this edge of being sophisticated enough technology that it's not basic and everyone is doing it today, and acceptable by society. So I think things today that are along that edge, an example might be virtual reality or augmented reality. It's kind of interesting technology. It's getting close to ready for prime time. Society's close to getting ready to adopt it, depending on what segments you're in. So that's a really interesting category opportunity because it fits on that line of the adjacent possible. And almost every big category that's been created was, at its time, along that line. And of course, everything moves to the lower left-hand corner over time. Why do you want to be the category king? Well, it often means market share, but it means more than that. The analysis we talked about earlier that PlayBigger did with the 66,000 companies and all the data crunching, one of the things that it showed was if you're the category king in your category, on average, you take 76% of the economics of the category. So it's basically winner take all, especially in digital markets, but it applies to all kinds of technology markets at least. So if you are fighting over the scraps of that 24%, you're not necessarily building a very exciting business. But if you're the category king, you're going to take ultimately 76% of the economics. And that's across the analysis of all these thousands and thousands of companies. That's what it modeled out to. So that will manifest itself in a lot of different ways. It could be about usage. So Dropbox, the king of file sharing, even Google, with all of Google's power, is still not the category king of file sharing, not even close. Market share is another way you see it. Uber, on a global basis, is clearly the leader in on-demand transportation, with Lyft being far behind second. And when HomeAway was sold a few years ago for around $4 billion, Airbnb's valuation, the category king, is $31 billion, playing in the same space. And in fact, HomeAway was out there first, and Airbnb really built the category out from under them. Another opportunity is when you're category king, you attract the best hires, so you can continue to fuel your success. This is a TV snapshot of a spot that was on with Dan Roth from LinkedIn and Susie Welsh, who's a journalist. She used to be the editor of the Harvard Business Review. LinkedIn had called her in to help with this analysis they had done, where they had looked at the most attractive companies to work for. Based on all of LinkedIn's massive amount of data, they could really determine what were the most attractive companies to work for and who did everyone want to work for. And she went in and did an analysis and did summary. And one of the things that she noticed was that 7 of the top 10 companies that people wanted to work for were all category kings. So there's a huge correlation between that kind of success and your ability to attract the right talent. Now, an interesting side story about this is the way this came to be was she called up Al Ramadan, one of the authors of the book, and started talking to him about this correlation and should they work on publishing some articles about it and things like that. And they had this great call, and at the end, Al says, well, how did you hear about our book, Play Bigger? And she says, well, my husband is Jack Welch, the chairman of GE and considered one of the best management gurus of the last century. And she said, well, Jeff Bezos gave my husband the book and said, you need to read this, and he gave it to me. So for Kevin, as a business author, this is, I think, the highlight of his career. He got pretty excited when he heard that story, because that doesn't happen to you every day, folks like that, saying they have to read your book. So what are some examples of companies that have done category design? This is an example that's actually in the book, but their story wasn't over when the book was published. So Sensity Systems was a lighting company. They were creating LED lights to replace outdoor light fixtures. And they had discovered that they had opportunities because of the size and the brightness of LED lighting to maybe do some other things than just have the light. And they decided they could network these lights together. They could put sensors in there, either pollution sensors or traffic sensors or all types of environmental sensors. So they had this idea, and they went to market with a new category that they called a sensory light network. Totally different than a light bulb. We're marketing this category called a sensory light network, and that's pretty different than Philips or GE. That's a cool startup, different approach to things. And what ultimately happened to them as they grew and became more successful is they got acquired, but they didn't get acquired by a lighting company. They got acquired by a networking company, Verizon, which is not likely something that would have happened if they had said, we're just in the lighting business and we're doing lights with some fancy features. They created this whole new category, and that was attractive to a networking company. Here's a super interesting example. Qualtrics is in the space of doing customer surveys and other types of surveys. They compete with companies you've probably heard of like SurveyMonkey and Medallia. And they did the formal category design process a few years back with the Play Bigger team, Al and Dave. And they created a category called experience management. They said, we're going to provide an experience management platform for the experience management category. And that is a pretty powerful sounding category. If you went into a CEO and said, do you want to talk to the head of a survey company? They'll say, oh, talk to my customer support team. If you go in and say, do you want to talk to the head of an experience management company? They're like, hey, that's more interesting. They went to market with this idea of the experience management category that they were creating, the platform that they were delivering, some smart marketing ideas like telling CEOs about the experience gap, that they might face the experience gap, and that's the gap between what you think as the CEO the customer experience is and what the customer thinks. And you better narrow that gap or you don't know what's going on in your customers' minds and you won't be successful. And they really hit it out of the park. So they raised an extra $150 million in funding from Sequoia, the biggest investment they had ever made at that time. And it fueled their value, but it really went a step further over time because they had been competing, as I mentioned, with SurveyMonkey and Medallia. SurveyMonkey went public at a high just below $2 billion. And just this summer, Medallia went public at just over $2 billion. But in between those two events, after a year or so after their lightning strike, where they repositioned themselves in the market and in people's minds, Qualtrics got acquired for $8 billion by SAP. So I'm not going to say that's all category design. They had a great company. They built great products. This direction of experience management really fueled where they were going. But it's a pretty dramatic shift for companies that had been competing in the same space, overlapping space for 16 years together, and were somewhat similar, let's say. So that's the opportunity that category design can do in terms of impacting your value. Now, we really focus on category design as just an organic core way to build your business. It's not just about valuation and that, but that can be a really nice side effect of doing the category design process. So Replicon is a Canadian company. It's 23 years old, started in Calgary. They're now based down in Redwood City, their head office. And they are in the category that Gartner today would call workforce management. And they're in a subset called time and attendance. And they talked to us because they wanted to more successfully enter the enterprise space from being an SMB type of supplier and wanted to fuel their growth. They've been pretty successful so far. But they're up against this giant behemoth, Kronos, billion-dollar company in their space, and they wanted to see what they could do to be different. And we worked with them and created a new category called time intelligence. So time intelligence is when you treat your time as it's as valuable as money. And it really opens up people's minds in corporations to look at their time and understand their time and be more productive and help their employees be more productive and really be able to work the levers. I mean, this is an example. If you have 1,000 people, you have 2 million hours, and the question that they're asking companies is, well, what did you do with those 2 million hours? Do you know what you did with it? Do you know if people were productive? And this launch that they did really jettisoned them into a new place in people's minds. We launched it at a trade show called HR Tech, 200 vendors, 30,000 attendees, giant show. And the salespeople came back with questions like this. Who are we competing against? So when you're trying to create a new category and you're going out and saying what you're doing and people don't know who you're competing against, that's gold. I mean, you've now created something new. People don't know Kronos is your competitor. You're doing something that's different. People are seeing it as different. And they're seeing it as more valuable. So in this case, people were connecting the idea of time intelligence to, does this tie into our BI systems, our business intelligence systems, and how are we going to leverage this? And is this important? And it really made an impression on people. And in fact, I spoke with this analyst after he came up to the CEO of the company. He said, I've been at this show, I've only seen 2 interesting things. One of them is this concept of time intelligence as a different way for companies to think about time beyond punch clocks and timesheets. Here's an example of a company down in Mountain View we worked with, Big Panda, and they work in it's called the NOC, the Network Operations Center. That's where all the servers that are running a company are, and all these operations people are trying to keep everything going. And they get alerts all the time from their little software systems, thousands of them, and have to figure out which are going to cause real problems. What do they have to pay attention to? Is their website going to crash on Black Friday and they're going to lose all their business? So they wanted to see what they could do to evolve and have a bit more of a powerful way to look at things. And we created with them the idea of autonomous operations. And they had been experimenting with using some AI to look at these alerts and try and understand them and automatically fix things. And they positioned as creating this category called autonomous operations. It's very powerful if you run an operations center. They went to market with an idea that was also a marketing concept, which was called L0. So if you run an operations center, you have level 1 technicians. That's the person you get on the phone when you call customer support. They don't know what they're talking about, and they have to go up to level 2. Well, it's the same in the information center. They had L1, L2, and L3 technicians, and we said, we're going to be L0. We're going to handle that before it even gets to L1. And that really started to work for them as a device in the marketplace to explain the idea of this category of autonomous operations, having things get handled by the system so you don't have to deal with it all manually. We worked with TaskRabbit last year to evolve their category, and that was really fun because TaskRabbit launched in Toronto last year, but got started in San Francisco 11 years ago. And they were one of the first companies to create a marketplace to, in their case, connect people who wanted to do work to people who needed something done. In this case, general tasks of any type, whether it's walking a dog or getting photocopies done, stuffing envelopes, repairing a hole in your wall, whatever it was you needed done, they would match people. So they kind of invented the gig economy in some ways. And 11 years later, they've been acquired by IKEA. They have a successful business, but they wanted to see what's next and what they could do to even build a stronger business. And we worked with them and came up with the idea of a task management network. Now, on the surface, that may not be a super consumer-friendly term. It may not even end up being used by consumers. But what it stands for is the idea of having a relationship with the people who are helping you. So the people who are heavy users of TaskRabbit, are in urban centers. They skew affluent and female, and they are often working with different taskers. And the idea is to create a network of people who you have that's your team. It's your team that helps you. When you need your dog walk, you have your dog walker. When you need whatever done, repairs to your house, you have that. And that forms a network, and you know them. And they're friends of yours. It's not a transactional gig economy thing, like hopping in an Uber and hopping out and never seeing that person again. You develop a relationship with them, but you can also share that network, with your friends, and that helps the taskers, that helps your friends. So the idea is to create this substitute for the way things worked 50 years ago, where you would call your neighbor's son to mow your lawn, or your Uncle Joe to fix your plumbing. In the world we live in now, that doesn't work as well, and we hire people to do those kinds of things. But the idea of this was to build that relationship back and the networking idea back and create something that's sticky and allows people to really develop relationships. And part of that is something we do. We're not going to get into the sausage of how you do category design, but you can read about it in the book. But one of the core ideas behind category design is called the point of view. And that's your story of the category. So there's a category name, which is nice, and you want to get it right, and you want to define this new category in people's minds. But what's behind that is your story of the category. Why is this category exciting? What is the problem that it's solving for you? And if I didn't solve that problem, what are the ramifications? And what's our vision for solving that problem? And then what kind of great outcome are you going to have if you use that solution? So that story is called the point of view, or POV, and that's really at the core of category design. Getting that story right. It's an emotional story people can connect with. They read it. They understand who you are and what you're about. And for TaskRabbit, in fact, the category name itself is far less important than this point of view of where they're going. And it's also an example of where doing the category design process impacts your product strategy. So given what we talked about, they want to create a network and have people work together. They've already started to roll out a series of new product features that support that as a concept versus where they were, all because they defined this new future of a different definition of a new category that they could create for people. This is a project I worked on with the Play Bigger team, a company called Treasure Data. They had technology that people would have described as Hadoop in the cloud, just a technical solution to a data problem. And the category that they created was live data management. And this was a snapshot from their website at the time. And live data management, on its own, those terms might or might not mean something to you. If you're an IT manager, they'll mean a little bit more. But when you finish that with this idea that all your company's data is connected, current, and accessible, that's really meaningful to a manager in a business. So if I can connect my marketing database to my Salesforce database to my customer usage and run queries across all of that and understand what marketing program drove my most successful customers who are high users, you can do amazing things. So when you have all this data connected in your company, it's pretty exciting for people. So they launched a platform for delivering on the promise of the live data management category. And they had a lot of success. They actually created another different category on the heels of that was very specific to a user set. And ultimately, last year, they were acquired by Arm Digital for close to $600 million, over $500 million. And that was a pretty small company. So one thing about category design is that it's not marketing. 30 years ago, it might have been called positioning, but it's different. And it goes beyond positioning and branding because, as we've talked, it's about your company strategy. It's really about where you're going, what are you creating. It's not about a bunch of words that say I'm this or that. And marketing is great, and you have to do marketing. and you will do marketing. But when you look at the differences here, conceptually, marketing is that usually positioning against your competition. And what features do we do better than the competition? And that's sucking you back into competing against other people versus creating new value for people. Messaging is classically that same type of thing, whereas we already talked a little bit about this concept of a point of view. What is your point of view? Different versus better. Clearly, that's been a bit of a theme we had here. And really, that ties into this idea that the category itself is solving a problem people have. So there's no need to go out and attack competitors. You want to highlight the problem for people. So you go out with a story that this problem can be solved, and that is what creates the category. So when should you do category design? People ask that all the time. And the answer is anytime. Really now, at whatever stage you're at. I think a great example of a company that's reinvented itself with the result of category design would be IBM. IBM, when they changed the face of technology and launched the IBM 360 mainframe computer way, way back, they were already a 50-year-old company at that time. And they went into this totally new space and created a totally new category that lives on today, computing. I mean, look where we've come. And they did the same thing a few years ago when they launched Watson. Now, whether Watson will be the category king of AI services for people remains to be seen. They have a lot of competition. But there's no reason not to do category design if you're a 100-year-old public company or if you're two people in a garage. One of our favorite clients, whose products are not in the market yet, are literally that. Two guys in an office on Treasure Island off of San Francisco who got a check from a VC who really believes in them because they had a very compelling idea. And we've actually designed 2 different categories for them as they scaled back their amazing long-term category. And we looked at, okay, well, how do we get there? And what's another category we could build on the way to it? So you can do it at any time. And I would encourage you to go do it now. Let's go design a category, dominate it, build a company that makes a difference, and let's keep Canada on the world stage and play bigger. There we go. So that's how you can reach us. If you want to get in contact with me, that's my email. It's a mouthful, but it's easy to remember, Category Design Advisors.
Well, first of all, I want to start by thanking Peter for the great insights that he provided us. And I learned a lot just from the time that you gave us here, and I really appreciate all the great work that you're doing. And as a Canadian, I'm very proud of the ambassador role that you've given us all your time over there. And hopefully at some point you'll come back here and we'll have you all to ourselves. So the next thing that I want to be able to do is, and I know I'm the only person standing between you and the great food outside and the networking, is quickly run through some of the things I've taken away and introduce myself and where I'm coming from. So my name is Osman Hamid. I'm the Director of Creativity and Entrepreneurship over at Ontario Tech University, a great institution in the region. And I'm lucky to be able to work with young people now on a daily basis and mobilizing the talent pool that we have and the great technology that's coming out of this university and be able to work it within a category related to tech with a conscience and being leaders within that category. And I believe without impact, we'll not be able to hit all the different trends that we're seeing in the world today. So instead of thinking only about the financial return on investment, thinking about the social impact that we can provide. So I think the work that we're doing through the Brilliant Catalyst program, and I encourage you to visit our website, and the work that we're doing, and definitely one of the really exciting programs is relevant to all the civic leaders, the business leaders, professionals, and definitely entrepreneurs and the growing startups that we have here, is the Brilliant Solutions program, where we have interdisciplinary teams from all over the university working on problems that you might have, and they will come with different perspectives that they can come and solve those issues with you. So that's something to look forward to, and I'm happy to talk about it during the networking session. Two things that I've taken away from this conversation that we've had. One, making sure that we're thoughtful and thinking about elegant design and making sure that we have purpose in whatever we're doing. And that's something that I caught from the whole presentation, and I read off the category, your website. The second thing is making sure that we're playing big but differentiating ourselves. And only through differentiation is when we're going to be able to get to that next level. And that's something I'm going to take back to our institution and to all the partners that we have. I want to thank 1855 Whitby for allowing us to be a partner with you, and we're very happy to partner with you in the programming that you have. And I encourage all of you to go out there, network. We've got some great local food right here from Whitby through Town Brewery and Chef Kevin through KB Foods. And with that, I'm done. I encourage you to head down those doors and go get your refreshments. Thank you so much.